Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey. From the world of Marvel Comics comes one of the most popular and action-packed big screen origin stories of all time, with an unlikely hero who faces death at the hands of his own weapons, forced to redefine who he is and seek redemption for past sins. We're talking about Iron Man. Iron Man was directed by Jon Favreau from a screenplay by Mark Fergus, Hawk Oatsby, Art Markham, and Matt Holloway. It was released in the United States on May 2, 2008, and was distributed by Paramount Pictures. Iron Man is based on the character created by Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Larry Lieber, and Don Heck, and debuted in Marvel Comics Tales of Suspense number 39 in March of 1963. The film centers on Tony Stark, a carefree billionaire philanthropist and defense contractor whose company, Stark Industries, is one of the world's top weapons dealers. The movie opens with Stark accompanying his friend and Lieutenant Colonel James Rhodey Rhodes to Afghanistan for a weapons demonstration for the military. But after Tony's military convoy is attacked, he is taken prisoner by terrorists who demand that he build a missile for them. Tony is held captive alongside Jensen, a doctor who saved Stark's life by implanting an electromagnet in his chest to prevent shrapnel from entering his heart. After realizing the degree to which his weapons of war have negatively impacted the world, Tony decides to fight back against his captors, and with Jensen's help, plan their escape. That escape comes thanks to a suit of armor complete with weapons of its own that Tony wears to eventually flee the caves where he's being held. Though Jensen does not survive the escape, Tony manages to evade the terrorists and get to safety where he's rescued by Rhodey. After arriving back to America, Tony announces to his longtime assistant Pepper Potts and his company's manager Obadiah Stane that he's decided that Stark Industries will no longer manufacture weapons. This decision sets off a chain of events that leads Tony to reconstruct and upgrade his initial suit of armor, become Iron Man, and attempt to save the day by being the hero he never meant to be. Iron Man was a smash with critics and fans alike upon its release. It made nearly $586 million on a budget of $140 million and was overwhelmingly embraced as a critical hit, spawning 2 sequels and propelling the character into what would come to be known as the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where Iron Man has appeared in a total of 9 films. Thanks to the casting, the action, the storytelling, and the performances, Iron Man remains one of the most popular comic book films of all time and is widely regarded as one of the best movies of its kind ever made. And that's the lowdown on Iron Man. So how do you kick off the Marvel Cinematic Universe, kids? You've got the blueprint in front of you. You've got the ideas pitched in front of you. You've got one guy saying, hey, we're giving you the reins. We want to do this thing right. We've had X-Men movies. We've had Spider-Man movies. But guess what? We want to do this right. We're going to do this thing. We're going to call it Marvel Studios. We're going to do what we're going to call Cinematic Marvel Universe, Marvel Cinematic Universe. We're going to do this thing right from the ground up, baby. And we want you to take the reins. Kids, who are you putting as your first movie? I know what you're thinking. Captain America. Well, why wouldn't you? The Hulk. Well, the Hulk's been done, but we can do it again. Everyone loves the Hulk, right? How about Thor? Dude, how do you not do Thor? Thor's great. Here's an idea. Fantastic Four. Maybe we'll get it right this time. Maybe we'll get it really, really right this time. Nope. Let's don't do any of that. Let's start off with Iron Man. Be honest, kids. How many of you full-time, die-hard comic book fans would have said Iron Man as your pick for the first flick of the Marvel Cinematic Universe to kick the whole thing off? How many of you, show of hands, you're all lying, okay? Because we a lot of us had love for Iron Man. Phil did too, I'm sure. A lot of us had love for Iron Man. How many of us actually thought, well, that's going to be what they kicked this thing off with? I sure didn't see it coming. I don't know if you did, but here we are doing this pod, this episode. Took us a long time to get here to talk about the movie that kicked off the MCU, for crying out loud. But here we are talking about it. This film dropped in 2008. Without this film, no MCU. So whoever the guy was in the room that raised his hand and said, I got an idea. If I had to place my bets, I would say Kevin Feige was the man that raised his hand and said, I got a great idea. Let's do Iron Man. What an amazing call. What a right call. And the rest, as they say, is history. Because without this film, we don't get the plethora of films we've seen since then and the plethora of films that are yet to still come. Dude, Phil, we're finally getting to Iron Man. This is the big bang here. This is the spark. Um, Going back and watching this film for God knows how many times I've seen this movie through the years. I won't say I was reminded how good it was. I know it's good, but man, it's so much fun. Uh, uh, we've talked about this guy, this character, on the shows so many times before. Um, but Phil, how does this movie hit you after X number of times of watching it? Is it still fresh for you? Does it still feel awesome and fun to watch?
Yeah, it's still fresh. It's crazy because parts of it age very well, and then parts of it you look at it like, man, just how far the MCU has come. Um, there are so many better movies than this, and not that this is a bad movie, but it's like, man, just when you thought like at that time, like this is great, and they upped the ante so many times since then.
Mm. How does this do for an origin story for you? I mean, you don't have to necessarily compare it to, say, Batman Begins or something, but for you personally, how does this hold up as an origin story?
I think it's a perfect origin story for Tony. I think it hits all the right notes for him. He comes off just as arrogant and selfish in the beginning, and he has the eye-opening moment, and it's a very realistic eye-opening moment. It's not one of those things where, oh well, he built the suit first, and then once he got the suit he realized, now that I have the suit, I have to do this for the betterment of the fellow man. Like, no, he went through something very serious and life-changing, and it changed him for the better.
Yeah, like he wasn't a Bruce Wayne archetype that just had a technological itch that he wanted to scratch. This thing was built out of necessity. To your point, he didn't just do it on a whim. He did it to save his own life. Um, I love the fact that they tied in directly to the comic book origin. They got very close, and they're going to adapt this thing as they see fit. And I'm totally fine with that. You can't do a 100% origin story. I mean, you take a lot of cues from the books, and to that degree, I thought they did tremendous. I think it's the right man. I feel like I'm summing this up at the end of the show. But it's got the right mix of humor and action, and the word fresh, I'm going to go back to it a couple times here, I think, because it just feels, man, it just feels good to watch this again. It's just a reminder of, like you said, the progress they made afterward and how very little they had done before this. This was it. This was their first shot out the gate. Phil, we've said this on the show, and I've asked you this before on other episodes. Paint me a picture, in your opinion. What happens if this movie tanks? What happens after that?
Oh man, it's an interesting question because I mean, so much of what the MCU is now is kind of hindering on the fact that this movie needed to be a success. If this movie is not a success, um, none of it works. We don't get the Avengers movie. We don't get all the way up to Endgame. We don't get any of the payoff
Hmm.
that came from this franchise.
And do we get an MCU if this movie tanks?
They might have gone back to the drawing board. We might eventually get it, but we definitely don't get it in the terms that we got it. Like I said, we don't get that incredible payoff in Endgame. We don't get a lot of the other things like uh, Iron Man being such a fixture in that first Spider-Man movie or the second
Mm.
one. Like there's so many things that just don't work if Iron Man doesn't succeed.
Oh, for sure. I used the word blueprint earlier. He really is the foundation of the MCU. He more than the Avengers as a team. I mean, Tony Stark is the foundation of the MCU. I mean, I think that's the best way to put it. And like you said, they may have gone back to the drawing board and tried something else. But and you know something, Phil, this is what a lot of people may not remember about this guy, this Robert Downey character. This guy, whoever he thinks he is, this now just one of the most famous men in the world, and very appropriate because he's put the work in and he's turned his life around years ago, and good for him. But man, at the time, he was damaged goods, man. His career was basically done. And John Favreau, of course, that directed Iron Man, he went to bat for him and said, "No, Downey's our guy." He's the guy. I'm telling you, this is our Tony Stark. I mean, man, I'm not even going to ask you who your other pick was, but I mean, explain to me why you think Downey is the perfect guy to play Tony Stark.
Um, well, I would say it's similar to say if Iron Man wasn't a success, the MCU isn't what it is today. I also don't think that the franchise or the MCU would be what it is without Robert Downey Jr.
Mm.
Um, I don't think that this movie works nearly as well without him. I don't think that it ends up being a success it is without him. I don't think you could just cast anybody and put him in the same movie. Now, do I think that you can cast somebody else as Iron Man? Yeah, but so much of those first two Iron Man movies relies on Robert Downey Jr. either improving or just chewing up scenery and us caring so much about him as a character. Um, and I don't think that works with just any actor. Not just any actor could have done that.
Yeah. Oh, no, no doubt about it. And, we've always heard the rumors of Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise's name was attached to the Iron Man movie for quite a while. And I think he totally wanted to do it. To be fair, Tom Cruise wanted to do a lot of stuff that he totally didn't do. He wanted to do the Prophet film with Image Comics with Rob Liefeld, and that didn't exactly work out too well. Uh, so Cruise seems to be on board for a lot of different stuff that doesn't pan out. But I'm just saying that's the nature of the beast in that town is that stuff doesn't more stuff doesn't get made that actually gets made, and that's the nature of the beast for Hollywood. But yeah, I'm with you. Without Downey, there is maybe that's a better question. Without Downey, is there an MCU? I would submit that there's not.
Yeah, I just don't think that. I don't think that these movies, in the way that they're structured, I don't think that, like, just look at the first maybe 20 minutes of this movie. I can't picture anybody else in that role. I can't picture anybody else
Mm-mm.
being as likable, and at the same time, you're thinking like this guy's like a massive jerk. But he's
Mm-hmm.
just so likable and he brings so much charm to this role. And I don't think you could just go and cast just any actor to do that.
And I talked about him being damaged goods because he totally was. Um, it occurs to me now, watching this years after the fact, his acting in this movie is very off the cuff. The lines feel improvised. It feels like he didn't memorize anything, that it's all ad libbed, that he's just talking off the cuff, and that from a distance, that looks like there's not a lot of effort being put in. But then when you look in his eyes in those dramatic moments, he is seething under the surface. Not that it's rage, but it's something. There's something boiling. And it kind of seems to me, well, did he go into this thing saying, well, look, this is my comeback. I'm going to make the best of it and I'm going to enjoy it? Or was it, I got this. I know I'm an actor. I know I'm good when I put my mind to it. But man, it just looked like he had something to prove, I think is what I'm saying here. Did you get that from his performance in this movie?
I don't know if I got this at the time. I definitely feel like Iron Man. Well, I don't know. I don't know if it's fair to say I feel like, because I mean, it did save his career. It's not
Yeah.
like I am coming with this, nuanced take that it saved his career. It clearly did. Um, but I mean, when you look at so much of what he did in those movies, like you said, it's so much of it is improv. I mean, when you hear the stories about how the movie was made and how they didn't really have a script, they just kind of went off the cuff with a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It makes so much sense, and it's almost kind of like you're just letting Robert Downey Jr. come on set and be Robert Downey Jr. And in the moments where you need him to be charming and likable, and this kind of like over the top playboy, he nails that stuff. And then when you need him to actually be serious and get you to care, he does that in spades.
How about the scene on the plane when the stewardesses are dancing around? It's so utterly ridiculous, but
Yeah,
it fits.
there are a lot of scenes in this movie that are just kind of ridiculous, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, but it works somehow because of Robert. Like, I don't think anybody else could have brought the same kind of levity and humor to this role.
And Downey gets it, right? Like this, and again, this is me not knowing if this is true, and God knows there's enough there's enough interviews with this guy in the past X number of years that the answer's out there. I just haven't looked. But it feels like he took one look at this character and said, "Oh, I know who this guy is." Because man, he embodies. If you go back and look at the books, dude, this is Tony Stark. Not just the goatee and the hair and the youth and the all the cockiness, but man, he's dialed in. I mean, it helps that he understands the character, doesn't it?
Um, yeah, the wildest thing you can say about Robert Downey Jr. is Robert Downey Jr. was so good in that first movie that he changed the way other people wrote Iron Man. He changed the way people wrote Iron Man in the comics. He changed the way people wrote Iron Man in other mediums.
Yep.
Because I think that he gets some of the quirks of Tony Stark, but he added so much to it that was his own that now it's just kind of hard to think of Iron Man as anything but what we've seen in MCU.
I recently picked up the trade paperback of not the New Avengers. It was the other team, the Mighty Avengers. I was more of a New Avengers guy, Phil, with Cage and Spider Woman and Spider Man. That was more my team.
Yeah,
But
I was a big fan of the Bendis run, the initial
oh
run when
yeah,
he took over the book after Disassembled. Yeah, I was a
yes.
big fan of that book.
But I picked up the trade of Mighty Avengers, and dude, I couldn't read, like sometimes not out loud as a production, but sometimes I'll read it out loud to myself just to kind of follow along. And I can't read Iron Man's bits, Tony's bits, without doing Downey's voice. Like I can't, like you said, even the way it's written has changed. I mean, that's the impact this guy had. Dude, even the animation, there's like a sound alike voice actor doing, and he sounds like the cadence is there, the little one-liners, everything's there. You're so on point with that, man.
Yeah,
Crazy.
I think that it's crazy that this wasn't just a career defining role for him. I feel like he went on to define Iron Man as a character for a lot of people.
Oh, for sure. Um, is Iron Man the right? Looking back on it, the answer is yes, obviously. Is there another character they could have kicked this off with and it would have worked, or did it have to be this guy with this movie? You think?
I mean, in a perfect world, you'd kick off the MCU with Fantastic Four, but of course they don't have the rights to
Mm,
them.
right.
I mean, it's
Right.
just too much symmetry there. That was Stan's first real creation. You know, they're the first family of Marvel. Yeah, the perfect world, I would think you start the MCU with Fantastic Four.
Of course.
But for what they were trying to do with the Avengers and starting the Avengers Initiative, it Iron Man works because he's not like most of the others. Like he's grounded in a way that the others are not. And that's not to say that he's more grounded than Steve, because of course Steve is not as privileged as Tony, but Tony brings, I don't want to say a little bit of cynicism to it
Mhm.
that you know it wouldn't have been the same if you started with Steve.
Interesting point, because we have extolled the virtues of Chris Evans as Steve Rogers because he freaking deserves it. But man, it's a different looking universe if he starts it off. Doesn't mean that it couldn't work, but
Yeah,
yeah, it's. I love that we got the yin and the yang almost from the jump because they're two sides of the same coin in a lot of ways. You know.
yeah. I think what makes a lot of those other characters that you introduce later and add to the team with Tony shine is that you compare all of them in some way to Tony, and I think that that's what makes Steve feel even more special when we're introduced to him, because he's like, no, he's not like Tony at all.
Yeah, for sure. Polar opposites, polar opposites. But like, I don't know. One guy, like you said, has a privileged upbringing. One guy has nothing. He has to earn everything that he has in this world. Nothing's handed to him, and then he gets the super soldier serum and becomes a better version of himself. I mean, it's two totally different stories. But at the end of the day, we know how Tony's story ends. We know how both their stories end in this universe. God, it's amazing how far we've come. Um, we've talked a lot about Downey. We've not even begun talking about Downey here, kids. let's talk about this cast, man. And I'm going to get out of the way one of your favorites. We talked about this guy on Ray, and you gave me not necessarily your take, but Jamie Foxx's take on Terrence Howard. Which, by the way, I can never forget now. When I first saw him on the screen yesterday, when I rewatched this movie again, the first thing I heard was your voice in my head say, "Tony, come on, man, Tony," and I was like, "Oh crap!" Now I'm stuck with it.
Oh man.
What about Terrence Howard as our first go around as James Rhodes? What do you think about him in this movie?
I'm gonna offer a hot take here. I don't
Uh-oh.
know if this is a hot take, but I prefer Terrence Howard as Rhodes.
Shut up. Are you serious? Really?
I don't know what it is about him in the first movie. He doesn't do that much, but I just think he looks the part.
Mhm.
He's got the military haircut. He just looks like an Air Force vet. You can look at this guy, and he looks like I can believe it. Um, like he's tall. He's he is a perfect foil for Robert Downey in a lot of scenes. Um, I think a lot of the stuff where they had scenes together, they had really good chemistry.
Mm.
Um, I think one of his best scenes is him knocking on the window when he gets in a Humvee, and he goes, "No, this is the fun V." And so, and then you get him when they finally save him. He's like, "Yeah, how's that fun V?"
Oh, that's
and
great.
and then he throws that joke out there, and then immediately after he goes, "Man, next time you ride with me, okay?" And the way he said it, it's just so good. It's like, I don't know, man. I just like Terrence in a role, and that's not to say I didn't enjoy Don Cheadle as well, but I don't know. I like Terrence better.
Well, you may have swung me to your side because you're right. That's a great line, and you're right. The way he delivered it is awesome. It's not lost on me that he's got an affection for Tony, and we never really get, to my knowledge, an explanation of how far back they go. Like, how long have they known each other? Do they just know each other through the contracts that Stark Industries has through the military? Is that how they know each other? Do they know each other from college? Where did it start? Like, I don't know. Um, but yeah, I love that. There's every reason in the world why he should never be hanging out with Tony Stark, but they're friends. Um, and then of course we get that tease of the War Machine armor. Uh, and he says, "Next time, baby." So,
um, yeah, I don't know, man. It's just that I think that it's something about him in the role that I just enjoy him more. And again, I really like Don Cheadle specifically in Iron Man 3 and Age of Ultron. I think he's great in that as well. But yeah, I don't know, man. I've always wondered what could have been if Terrence Howard didn't ask for more money.
I mean, when you want more than the star is going to get, kids, you may not get it unless you're Nicholson and the other guy's Keaton. Um, I'm not throwing shade. I'm just trying to make a point. But yeah, Marvel proved, hey, Terrence, listen, you go, we appreciate you. We're going to go another direction, and they didn't miss a beat. Don Cheadle's great. Um, if I'm nailed down on specifics, I love Cheadle. If you're asking me, would Cheadle have been better in this movie? I don't know if it'd been better, but no, you're right. I think Terrence Howard did his job. Um, Again, I agree with you. The stature, the height, the build, all of that screams War Machine armor to me, not necessarily Don Cheadle. No disrespect to Cheadle's in great shape for the films, But yeah, I totally see where you're coming from. He does look like a military guy. So I get it. Um, Jeff Bridges as Obadiah Stane, the dude abides. All right. Um, I love this guy, and I knew without seeing a bunch of the trailers, because I didn't want to see a bunch of the trailers before the movie hit, so I intentionally didn't watch them. I knew he was probably going to be the heavy. I had a feeling. Like, I'm thinking, well, I know the books. I know who Stane turns out to be, but Bridges is so good for me that I'm like, when he makes the turn, I'm like, oh, it was deflating because he's so good. He's so charming. He's such a good actor, man. What do you think about Jeff Bridges, the dude, as Obadiah Stane in this movie?
I think he's great. I think once he does make the turn, even when he makes hints of the turn, he's just so he's just so intimidating without doing much.
Oh,
Just the changes in the tone of his voice, just his facial expressions. I just think he's fantastic in this movie.
mm. Yeah, he's great. The scene where he's intimidating Pepper Potts. Whew, that was after all these years that had me on the edge of my seat. I was anxious, and I'm like, "You idiot! You've seen these movies a dozen times or more, if not more." But I couldn't help it. Like I was, it's such a good moment, and he's like you say, he's so man without saying anything, having hard liquor in the middle of the day, like they do in the soap operas. Of course he is. He's a hard edge kind of guy. But yeah, dude, I'm with you. I think he was great in this. He's a father figure for Tony, as the story goes. The man in the photos that we see, Tony's father, is not the same Howard Stark from either version that we got later. It's someone else. There's three Howard Starks here, which is, I was not thinking that. But yeah, that's different. But yeah, he's a father figure. And those moments when it's just him and Tony, you really feel like he cares about this guy. And then when you find out, because he said the words, I ordered the hit, I'm like, holy God, like we're just gonna, that's a gut punch to me. Like I'm like, oh dude, man, this guy trusted you and you did this to him. Oh man, what a gut punch. But that's Phil, as we've always said, you're not a villain in your story. You don't think you are. You think you're the hero. You think you're doing the right thing. And this guy, even though he, as he said, ordered the hit, I'm sure he thought, well, Tony's the one that's lost his mind here. He's not the right fit. I am. We don't need him anymore. So um, a good villain. I mean, what other villain do you start out with Iron Man, if not the Mandarin? I mean, it would have to be Obadiah Stane, would it?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much of his character that's rooted in well, corporate America
Hmm.
and war profiteering that it just made so much sense for it to be either Obadiah or another one of those characters like him or Justin Hammer.
Oh, Justin Hammer. I can't wait to do that movie because I love that character. He's so deliciously tacky and slimy, that guy, slimy. Um, Gwyneth Paltrow as Virginia Pepper Potts. If I'm being real, I didn't know the character's first name was Virginia. Had no clue. Been a comic fan for years, didn't know that. Pepper Potts. I just, there's some parts that I feel like no one else gets this part but this person. She's great. She's a knockout, but she doesn't have to be a knockout. In other words, she's not like, well, I'm runway model all the time. Like in the scene at the party when she's got the dress with no back, she is runway model gorgeous. But like the rest of the time, she's corporate, like you said, corporate America. She's got the business suit. She's looking the part. I think it's the perfect mix, and I love the idea that she's been Tony's assistant for years, and he never really looked at her the way he did when he got back from being in prison, because everything changed for him. What do you think about Gwyneth Paltrow here, man?
I think she's great. I think, like you said, that she works as somebody that is attractive enough that you can buy her as a leading lady, and then at the same time, you could buy her as like a essentially a secretary or a assistant for Tony that he wouldn't necessarily look at because he's out doing other things. Um, but yeah, I think she's great. I think she's great in the serious moments. I think she's great in the early moments of the movie, especially when the reporter comes downstairs.
Ah,
I think she delivers a great line with, sometimes my job is to take out the trash as well. I thought that was great.
so good. She's very, very confident in herself. The relationship between these two, as we know, kids blossoms. They eventually become husband and wife, right? And they have a kid. Um, they, in a weird way, are just meant to be together. Like They said it a couple of times in this movie where he says, "I don't have anybody else," and it really drives the point home. This guy's alone. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. And it's the old adage, Phil, of you can have all the money in the world and still be in a room full of people and you are completely by yourself. That's Stark. It's the way he's lived his whole life. And then, of course, she says it back to him at one point, "You're all I have too." And I'm like, man, this is so perfect. It's been right on their noses the whole time. I mean, dude, she's got a lot to bear because she's seen him womanizing over the years. And it bothers her because they have that moment on the rooftop where she goes in for the kiss first. And you could tell that in that moment, I was like, oh my God, did she read it wrong? Is he not? But then when she pulled back, you could see it on his face that, nah, he's there, but he's, she's nervous and he's going to walk away and get her a drink. And then left her on the rooftop, which they added in, by the way, later, which was awesome. What is it about their relationship that works so well, you think? Is it because the two actors have such chemistry together, you think?
Yeah, I think that they have such good chemistry that they feel like a believable couple.
Mm.
Um, I also think in the first movie they do a good job of setting up, you know, why they would be interested in each other and why it might not, why it didn't need to get a payoff at the end of the first movie right away. That was one of the things I really liked about this movie, that they didn't end up kissing by the end of the movie, that they left it open.
Mm.
Because a lot of these movies, superhero movies, it's like the guy has to get the girl by the end of the movie, and
Right.
especially like Tony Stark, because we've seen him as the ladies' man for the entire movie. That you think, oh well, he's gonna get this happy ending, and they're going to have a happily ever after, and no, it just kind of leaves you on a tease at the end of the movie.
Yeah, I like that too because you have the feeling that they're together because they work together, and if as long as they work together, there's a chance that something else could happen later, which is great. I love that idea. Um, we also have Sean Taub. I don't want to mispronounce his last name here, as Ho Jensen. If we could say, Phil, there's one guy that sparked this, and I use the word sparked and Big Bang because that's what this movie is for me of the MCU. Without Jensen, Tony Stark doesn't do a 180. If he was in that cave by himself, if he was not injured and they just captured him and told him to build this thing for them, he doesn't make the turn, I would imagine. Jensen is the guy that basically, and when Jensen dies, it's very much on the nose when he says, "Don't waste your life." I'm like, oh, stop it. Like it's so not subtle, right? But I don't know if it had to happen that way, but dude, without Jensen, Tony doesn't become a changed man. Do you know what I mean? What do you think about his impact as a character here for Tony Stark?
I think he's great in the scenes he's in, and it is on the nose for him to say that. But I like the reveal of, because when they're playing chess earlier, he's like, I have a family and all this, and then he gives the reveal, my family's dead. I have nothing to go back to. This was always the mission. I did this. I did this all for you, so don't waste it.
Yeah, that's great. He says my family's dead. He says it's so, and Tony gives him that look, and he says it's okay. It's okay. I want this. He's so at peace, and I'm like, man, the heck with this guy for getting me emotional on a movie that's been out for years. But man, he's so good in that moment. Like he's totally at peace. Like the terrorists can't hurt him anymore. He doesn't have to be threatened anymore. He gets what he wants. I just, again, without him, first of all, helping Tony, but second, showing Tony a better way. And you could see it when they threaten Jensen they threaten to hurt him, and Tony sticks his neck out for him, and you're like, this guy's changing. I mean, we don't get the Tony Stark we get later unless Jensen happens, and I love that about him, and I love that we see that play out later as well, because the normal everyday Joe, so to speak, can get Tony. They can get him in a way that nobody else can, because Tony's not he's not money. He's not all tech. Tony down deep is still, man, I'm psychoanalyzing a fictional character here, Phil. But Tony down deep is still that hurt kid that lost his parents. So when somebody can get him, like emotionally get him, he'll do whatever he can do to help them, which is, I think, what happened with Jensen here. Like he saw, this is, I've got to do something. I can't go back to the way I was before. I mean, what do you think about, speaking of the captivity scenes and everything, when they pull that bag off his head, and we know from the past with Al Qaeda what the next moment was going to be? This did not feel like such a blatant, tasteless. This felt good. This did not good, but it didn't feel like it was cheap. In other words, like exploitation. This felt like it was bringing you the gravity of Stark's situation. What do you think about the way they handled these characters with it being the Middle East? Do you think all that ages well? Does it age at all? Is it okay? How do you feel about that?
Um, this movie gets really dark. It's like
Yes, it does.
it goes from like the really funny scenes of him being in a Humvee, and it's so easy to like him off those scenes, and then it just gets really really dark. Like you see everybody in that was in that scene with him die within a matter of minutes.
Man.
Um, and then you get him, ironically getting almost killed by his own weapon, and then the next time we see him, he's got the bag on his head. It's I don't know. I won't say that I don't think that it aged well, um, because it's such a big part of his origin story. But man, like just rewatching it, I guess because I haven't seen it in a while, I was like, yeah, this is dark.
It is dark, and that country that Gilmura, which I imagine is not an actual country, it's a Marvel country, I would imagine. Um, yeah, I think and honestly, I just don't. This coming from the Westerner who's a white guy giving you his take on the Middle East. Gather around, kids. I'll tell you the truth. That's not it. But for me personally, I didn't come away from this thinking, "Oh God, that was tacky." It just felt like thugs. It felt like a gang. It felt like these are bad guys. I just didn't get the feeling of, oh man, come on. I mean, it would make sense that, I mean, this guy he's a war contractor. He's an arms dealer. Yes, he's going to be involved in certain areas of the country with the military. This makes a lot of sense to me. Not saying it's right or wrong, kids, but we're going to address some parts of these flicks over these shows, just to sort of address the what may or may not be issues for some people here. I don't mind talking about anything here on the show, but for me personally, I didn't bump into anything on that. I felt like it makes sense that he's there and he's doing this little show and tell for the military, the Jericho as they call it. Um, the Stark Tech in this movie, Phil, this is just the tip of the iceberg of what we get later from Stark Tech, Stark Industries. I mean, man, we're getting just a bit of it here. But talk to me about the tech of this, specifically the Iron Man suit. I mean, it's half real world and it's half CGI, pretty much, maybe 2/3. I mean, talk about if this movie tanks, the MCU doesn't happen. If this suit doesn't look good, what happens? I mean, dude, he looks great. This suit looks phenomenal, doesn't it?
Yeah, I thought all of the scenes where they used practical suits for him, I thought they looked really good. Like I mean, even like the first time we see the Mark One looks surprisingly good. For looks like mostly practical special effects.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then we get Mark Two for the first time, and you can see all of all of the independent parts on it moving before he
Oh,
like starts walking and moving around in it, and it just looks so good and so believable. Um, hey, I definitely agree. I think if you had gone with just hokey looking CG for the entire movie, it might not have been as good.
yeah, yeah. Too much CG ruins it. You got to have some real world tech in here. I agree with that. Real world effects. I think it looks great. I love that he told Jarvis to paint it hot rod red. I love that. Too much gold, which is great. I
Yeah,
mean, good stuff.
yeah, I definitely enjoyed a lot of the scenes of him building the suit, whether it be in the cave with Jensen or all of the tests he did in his basement building it. I think a lot of the charm of this movie is him creating the armor.
And the Mark One, dude, is as close to comic book original as we could ever hope to get. It's not quite, but man, dude, Marvel could have said, nah, I don't want to do that. We're not putting this guy in a cave. He's going to be slick and he's going to develop this armor from the ground up. And Mark One's going to be the red and gold. Dude, the Marvel honors the characters, Phil, that we see time and time again. Let's honor the character's origin. They put him in a cave, and by God, they put him in that tin suit, and it looks great. I mean, again, they didn't have to do it, but it looked so good, and it made sense for the environment. It's not possible, obviously, but it looked like it could be just from that. I mean, what about Marvel sticking to what brought them to the dance with the books here in the movie?
Yeah, I was glad to see a version of the first armor. I thought it looked really good. I thought them sticking to as close to its origin as they could. I thought it worked because I think it's so important to why his character changed.
Mhm.
I mean, if we're just buying that he's a he's a billionaire that just decided I don't want to make weapons anymore, we have to get a reason why he got to that place.
Mhm.
And I think taking us into the cave, going through the dark moment that he did of seeing his own weapon almost kill him, and everything else he experienced out there, yeah, it made it very believable that he would get home and go, no, I'm not doing this anymore.
I mean, Killmonger wasn't there to grab that rocket and throw it away from him so he wouldn't get hurt. Let's don't forget that. That's the first thing that popped into my head when that moment came. I thought about the What If series. Um, yeah, man, it's so many things connect to each other. These movies in Marvel are nothing if not a gigantic jigsaw puzzle, and not just one movie to the next, but one scene to the next. They'll have callbacks several movies later, which I love about these guys. They're the kings of it. They're the kings of this stuff, man. They're so good. They're the experts at it at this point. Yeah, I'm with you. I love the fact that they put that stuff in there, and it's just, oh, I'm just so happy with so much of this movie. We talked a little bit about Jarvis, Paul Bettany, which we didn't know until much later. This guy's going to be the Vision. Spoiler alert, everybody. But perfect, even as just the voice of Jarvis. What do you think about Jarvis not being an actual physical butler? Is that a big deal? Does it matter at this point? Did it ever really matter, you think?
No, it doesn't bother me. Not a most wealthy people don't have butlers now. Like,
Right.
that's kind of a thing of the past. A lot most people that you see now that have a lot of money, you wouldn't see some guy walking around in an actual like butler suit. Like they addressed that in the Fresh Prince of Bel Air reboot because Jeffrey's in it and he's not a butler. He has other roles.
Nice. Yeah, it's very Bruce Wayne and Alfred kind of thing, which I think maybe is a good idea to stray away from, perhaps. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, too much aesthetic there. That's too similar, I think, for a feature film. Um, Phil Coulson is here, folks. Clark Gregg, the one and only Clark Gregg, is Phil Coulson. And here's where I start to bump into stuff, Phil. As we all know, Captain Marvel came down the road from this film, and the Captain Marvel film, it's Shield. They've already got the acronym, but in this movie, Clark Gregg acts as though they don't know what to call themselves. And then they suddenly say, huzzah, let's call it Shield, as if it was Pepper's idea. Have a product or a service that you want to get out into the world? Always wanted to try your hand at podcasting but don't know where to start? We've got you covered. Pod for Hire is a podcast production company that offers turnkey services to fit your needs. We produce your show from start to finish, allowing you the valuable time you require to focus on your established clients as well as prospective clients. We pride ourselves on delivering a top-notch product that will set your business apart from the rest and give your company the exposure it deserves. For more information, give us a call at 1-828-800-9880 or email us at info@podforhire.com. Pod for Hire. We take the work out of podcasting. I don't know why I bumped into that so hard, but I sure did. I love the touch that they didn't know that they didn't call it S.H.I.E.L.D., but then again, Captain Marvel comes along later and kind of retcons the whole thing, which is freaking all kinds of weird to me. But again, as far as performances go, Clark Gregg, very understated, very matter of fact, when that's not the kind of characters he's played before. But man, Coulson is Coulson, man, right? I mean, what more can you say about this guy other than he's freaking awesome? I love this guy.
Yeah. I mean, once you get all the way to Avengers, it's hard to not get excited about Coulson showing up in the movies because you kind of miss him at this point because he hasn't been in a movie in over 10 years.
Right. Wow. Has it been that? Yeah. Yeah, for real. Crazy. You're right. Yeah, he's great here. Couple of little side notes here. Faran Tahir, who plays Raza, the leader of the Ten Rings, which, spoiler alert, they may call themselves that, but he's not the Mandarin. And then later, we got the Mandarin, but he's not the Mandarin either. So that's different. But then we did get the Mandarin in Shang-Chi, and it was very good. So we took a long time to get there, Phil, but we finally got there. I think he did an admirable job here. We also got, let's see, Christine Everhart, the character of Christine Everhart, a reporter for Vanity Fair, played by Leslie Bibb. She doesn't have a lot to do in this film, but she does her job very well. She ends up being sort of a Jiminy Cricket on Stark's shoulder, which we didn't see coming, because she points out the fact that they're still dealing arms, even though he tells Stain he wants out. And then, of course, the big reveal at the end, Sam Jackson as Nick Fury, director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Yeah. And also we get Stan Lee with the obligatory cameo as Hugh Hefner, which happens very fast. Yeah, that's good stuff. So, and I didn't know this either. Ghostface Killah had a cameo in this movie where Stark is in Dubai, but they cut the scene out because of time, I guess.
Yeah, he got cut, but there's a Ghostface Killah song that plays in the movie, right?
I
think it plays during the plane scene.
I didn't put that together, but yeah, I think you're right. That's awesome. Yeah. Oh, and of course, dude, we didn't mention Favreau's Happy Hogan, a very, very small role in this movie. They got very, very big later, and man, he's in great shape in this movie too, dude.
Yeah, I love him as Happy Hogan. He just works as like a goofy sidekick. It just works, man. Like you just think of stuff like Swingers and other things that Favreau has been in, and you like look at him now. It's just you can't help but like it.
Yeah, he's awesome. I mean, by the way, side note, folks, the latest buzz on him is that they're giving him the keys to the kingdom. They freaking love this guy for the Star Wars stuff, and give him a movie, give him a full length motion picture, and he can take it. There's a lot to take when you sign up for doing a Star Wars film, kids, because people suck. But I think he could take it. I think he'd do a bang up job. So I vote Favreau. Great cast for this movie, man. It's not too big. It's not too unwieldy. And I think the people they got were great picks. And I think everything clicks. Tony Stark is the ultimate playboy, and that's how he lived his life for most of his life until the events that happen in this film. I love that we get AC/DC from the opening shot because that ends up defining this character through. Didn't they play an AC/DC song in every Iron Man flick and every Avengers flick he was in? Or I could be wrong about the Avengers flicks.
I know that they play Shoot to Kill when he shows up for the first time in Avengers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Shoot to Thrill, sorry.
Shoot the Thrill. That's it. Yeah.
Um, I'm trying to think. Do they? There's this great, fan edit of the Iron Man theme coming on as he does the snapping in game, and
I've
I
seen
wish
that.
they would have done it in the movie because it's so good.
It's so good. And supposedly Downey wore a lot of his own actual clothing in these movies. Like in the first Avengers, he wore a Black Sabbath shirt, and it's his shirt that he wore to the set. And he's like, "Can I just wear this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." You're freaking
Yeah,
Robert Downey. Without you, we're not doing this. Wear what you want. It's great. I love stories like that. I
yeah,
just think it fits him. The 80s metal stuff just fits him, man. It fits the character to a T.
yeah. I mean, as much as you can go into the fact that I think this movie, like the first two Iron Man movies, I think that they do pretty well for the first act, and then the second act is good, and then the third act isn't as good.
Mm.
But man, there's something about him at the end of the movie, nailing the final line of the movie, and it's such a great way to end the movie. And then it cuts into the Iron Man theme over the ending credits. It's so great.
Oh, I love it. It's awesome. Um, Dude, I remember being in the theater because every time I see the end, I remember how I reacted. And I'm in the theater when this moment happened. And much like Charlie Cox as Daredevil in the Spider-Man film, and a lot of other Marvel moments, folks, because they're awesome. But when that at the very end happened, I threw my arms up like in celebration and went, "Oh!" And the whole theater did the same thing because no one saw that coming. I mean, dude, if nothing else, that last little zinger, and then the Sam Jackson, Nick Fury stuff at the end, that to me, that is flat out Marvel Comics. That is Marvel saying, we've got nothing to lose. We're going for broke. We are going for the throat. And if this thing fails, we're going to have fun failing because we're going to give you everything you've ever wanted in a Marvel movie, everything you ever expected, and then some. And dude, I'm here for it. Like, I think this movie does an excellent job of setting the tone, if nothing else, setting the tone for the MCU. I think they nailed it in the first. How do you nail it in the first movie? Is it because of Favreau, or is it Favreau and the cast and the story? Is it a combination of everything?
Uh, I just think it hit all of the right notes, man. I think that it was just such a good origin movie.
Mm.
Because I mean, really, once you get past the origin of the movie, there's not much stuff there story wise. It's like you get the Stain reveal, but like most of the movie is just his origin. So it's not like it's this super complicated story. Um, but I just think it's just that Favreau knew to just let Robert Downey be Robert Downey, and allow people to be excited by a new character. And I think that's part of it that really drew people in as well, because for a long time we got a lot of the same characters on
Mm.
screen when it came to comic books. And I think um, to Marvel's benefit, they weren't able to go back to some of their established hits. They had to now, create hits and create, new fan favorites with people. And I think that's what made Iron Man so easy to like right away. Is it's like we haven't seen anything like this.
Yeah, I agree. I think it helped their cause that they had to start off with a mid Carter, as we say in wrestling. Had to start off with a mid Carter, not the main event guy, but the mid Carter, not the world champion, United States champion. It's okay.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, it sounds crazy to think of, but Iron Man was like a C-list character at best
mm,
before the movies.
yeah.
He was not a flagship character. Now, he's essentially like Mickey Mouse from Marvel.
Oh, he so is. Good call. Yeah, good call. And how many more people in the world know that face and that mask, that helmet than ever before? They know it now, Crazy. You're right. He's become a mascot for them. I love it. But you know what? As the comic book guys on the pod here, Phil, I think you and I probably both agree on this. None of this, none of it, from cut or an action when it's yelled the first time to the last time they yell cut on this movie and they wrap it. None of this works without the wealth of source material from the books, because a lot of the stuff you see in the films come from the books, and that's why I'm always encouraging everyone I know. Oh, did you like the movie? Go buy some books. Download them if you want to. Put them in your hands, even better. I got some. You want to read them? Come read them. I mean, because, dude, that without the backlog of issues, we don't get any of these films. And I love the fact that Marvel doesn't run from that. They would have no reason to, but they don't run from that. They run toward it, which is great, dude. I think it's brilliant. And I think they just continue to make fans happy. I don't know of one moment in this film that I wasn't happy with. I can say that some were better than others, but overall, this film's a hit for me, man.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they tied in a lot of the stuff that people liked about the character from the comic, and there's enough for people who don't know of the character at all. There are a lot of really good Easter eggs, like the original theme song that they played several points during the movie, like that the nod to Ghostface, because Ghostface used Iron Man a lot during his discography. Yeah, there's just so much stuff here to like about this movie. Yeah, the only place that I always feel like it struggles is the third act, because I feel like that fight with Ironmonger could have been better. But when you really look at the fact that this was their first major movie, this was their first go of it. It's kind of harder. It's kind of harder to look at that and go, "Oh man, well this just ruins the movie for me because this third act is awful." And it's like the third act isn't horrible, but it's definitely not as good as the rest of the movie.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I don't get too hung up on it, but I can see where you're coming from on it for sure. We've we flat out said it. I mean, Tony Stark is no longer with us in the MCU, kids. He has bid us adieu. I mentioned Tom Cruise. There's tons of rumors going around about the Doctor Strange flick coming up this year. By the time you guys listen to this, that film may or may not be out. We'll see how we plan on releasing this particular episode here, but there's rumors that Cruise may do a small cameo as a Tony Stark from another reality, from another universe, which I'm totally okay with, because it's not the Tony Stark that we know, and I'm fine with that. Phil, is there a scenario, and I think Downey's probably done. I don't know why Downey would ever want to do this again, because talk about the opportunity to not only bring a character to life, but to tell his origin, to tell his growth, and to tell his end. And you had a hand in all of that. That's got to be a very fulfilling thing for him as an actor, if for no other reason, that he got to do that for one character, and he's the only one that did it. I mean, him coming back to this role is like Jordan going to the Wizards, and I love Jordan, but dude, you leave on the game-winning shot in Utah. You don't come back. That's how you leave. So, like, I mean, is there a reason? Could you see a scenario in which he physically comes back, or do you think they should just leave this alone?
I don't think he's gonna come back and put the armor on, but I could see him coming back in like a small cameo here and there or something throwaway. Like I know for they're doing the Ironheart stuff, and in Ironheart, he's an AI for Ironheart. So I could see him showing up as like a hologram or something.
Ooh.
But I don't think it's going to be anything long term, no.
Yeah, I just don't know why they'd ever want to. So, listen, we've done Black Panther here. We've talked about why so many people are against recasting the Panther, and I get it. I'm not mad about it. I disagree, but I'm not mad about it. I get why people believe he shouldn't be recast. But do you recast Iron Man? Do you bring another Tony Stark? Why even go there? I mean, is there a point to going there besides, hey, we need to bulk the Avengers up? I mean, it seems cheap now, doesn't it? Why even do that? Is there a scenario where that could work, or do you think that's something they even want to try?
No, I wouldn't recast him. There's no reason to recast him at this point. You've got enough characters, and you could go enough time away from those initial Iron Man movies without giving us anything Iron Man related.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, you still got so many characters you haven't used, and now you're getting a lot of your flagship characters back again. I don't think you recast them.
Yeah, I agree. I'm fascinated. I'm intrigued by the Tom Cruise idea. I actually really love it. And I think that if anyone could pull this off and do it the right way, it's absolutely Marvel. It's absolutely Marvel. And I think that they could do it in such a way where it would be a very, very subtle nod to the character of Tony Stark, but not so much where it would make you feel like, oh, they just made that a joke. Like, I hope not. I hope I'm right. Um, but I trust Marvel. They've not really let me down all that much, if I'm being straight. So I'm totally fine with it. Um, we didn't get to see Iron Man really do a lot of his stuff until the Ironmonger scenes. I mean, we got the bit where he goes back to Gilmora and protects the villagers, and then when they leave the terrace lane there, and he says, "He's all yours," and he flies off. That's so metal. I love that so much because it's like these people have been oppressed, they've been terrorized, they've been threatened, they've seen their kids. Maybe some of them have had their kids killed in front of them or lost their parents, and now here's this guy, and this Iron Man dude just left him there for us. I mean, there's little touches like that. Talk about going dark. That's pretty dark, right? But I don't know. There's little touches like that I like, but we didn't really get a. Besides the Ironmonger stuff, we just got to see him showing off the suit. How important was it we don't get the villain till the third act? Isn't don't you spend the majority of the movie showing what the suit can do and then getting the third act? Isn't that the best way to go?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think the one scene where we do get to see him in action in a suit, where he goes to that war zone, and we get that awesome scene of him getting blown out of the sky, and he comes out with the war damage on the armor, and then he he shoots down that tank with like one shot, which was awesome every time I
Yeah,
see it. Um, and I remember that was in the trailer. That
it
was one of
was.
the selling points for the trailer of him turning around when the tank explodes. It looks awesome every time I see it. Um, I mean, but yeah, we don't get a lot of him, getting into like these massive like action scenes in the suit. Um, and I think to me that's part of why the third act kind of isn't as good, because it's like we're waiting for him to cut loose with the armor all movie, and then
Oh,
it kind of never happens because it's like by the end of the movie the armor is kind of still unfinished. So yeah, it's just like that fight isn't as good as it could have been. But it doesn't ruin the movie for me. It's just one of those things where I look back at it and it fuels my take that Iron Man 3 is the best Iron Man movie, because by far I think Iron Man 3 has the best act of any Iron Man movie.
mm, I'm inclined to agree with that. Why is Ironmonger so big?
Because I always looked at it as Tony would come back and he would make the suit smaller and more sleek, like actual technology, and
Mm,
he would make it sleek like a sports car. But Obadiah Stane, he's all about power. He's all about showiness. So he's gotta make it as big and brolic as possible because that's
mm.
his personality.
How'd you solve the icing problem? The what? That's great. That's so good. Another callback from earlier in the film. It's perfect. It worked great. I mean, there's those little moments that make you know this is Hollywood. That's how Hollywood works. You have callbacks when you need to have them. Um, I think that it was important for Tony to connect to the audience, which I think he very much did. I think that you felt his pain when he saw his weapons being used in the wrong hands. Um, I think that you could laugh with him when he made jokes, and he makes a lot of them. I think that you could think he's cool when he's driving the sports cars, and he drove them. And he's awesome when he's got the beautiful women, and he had them. I just think there's so much of this guy that you could latch on to, even if it's just one thing. I mean, you latch on to Cap for different reasons, right? But you latch on to Tony for a lot of other different reasons. So they hooked the fans, they hooked the audience. I'm in the bag for this film, dude. I just think it's so good. And I think as far as origin stories go, and I told you earlier I wasn't going to do this to you, but what do you think? I hate to, I'm not trying to pick on Batman Begins here, but I'm trying to think of another comic origin story that sort of set off a universe. That movie set off two films instead of a universe, right? But um, how do you feel about this particular origin story compared to others in the genre? Do you think is it hard to compare and contrast because oftentimes it's Marvel versus DC, or what's your thoughts on that?
Um, the funny part is, I in some ways think that Batman Begins is a better origin movie because it focuses so heavily on um being Bruce Wayne's story. It's so focused on
Mm.
building this world in Gotham around Bruce and Batman. But this, I feel like Iron Man is a good origin movie, but I think that it also does so much world building for an entire universe instead of like his pocket of that universe. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And we didn't know that at the time. We didn't know what else was coming, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. But yeah, I mean, even when you get to the end of the movie, it's not like and because it's man, I hate even comparing it to other movies because they've perfected this at this point. But
Mhm.
when you really think about it, at the end of the movie, it doesn't tease to anything related directly to Tony. It teases to something with the Avengers. It teases to something larger in scale. And like when you look at the end of Cap, for example, the end of his movie is directly related to who Steve Rogers is as a character, and it
Mm.
it leaves you wanting so more of that character. Um, and even like the stuff at the end when we get him doing the punching bag, it's still focused solely on Cap. Like it doesn't seem like it's as broad as like, look, Avengers. This is a big commercial for Avengers, even though that
Right.
ended up being a trailer
Right.
um after Cap. But still, it's just I just feel like other movies have done it better, and that's such an unfair criticism because they've perfected it at this point. I mean the nearest one I will say by far I think Shang-Chi is one of the best origin movies Marvel has done.
Mm.
Um and when you get to the end of Shang-Chi, yeah, they do tease something bigger with the rings, but it's still pretty heavily centered on what's next for Shang-Chi.
Good point. Yeah, it's not, and maybe the first Doctor Strange, you could argue, even though Thor had a cameo in the end.
Yeah.
Maybe you could argue Doctor Strange because it did, you didn't feel like you were moving toward the Avengers necessarily, but it just felt like him.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Doctor Strange is also a very underrated origin movie. I feel like it's one of the more underrated Marvel solo movies.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we've covered that here on the show here, kids. I mean, you're in the right place. If you like Marvel stuff, man, you're in the right place. Um, yeah, I see where you're coming from. And I find it funny how Nick Fury calls it the Avenger Initiative and not the Avengers Initiative. It makes me think two things. One, is that just what they called it, and then they realized, hey, we should probably call this Avengers Initiative, or was it called Avenger Initiative because Tony was the only one they had? I mean, Fury made it clear. He said, "Do you think you're the only one to do what you did? You're the only one to do something like this," or however he said it. I'm thinking, what does that mean? Are we going to acknowledge other heroes exist? And then he says the Avenger Initiative. So I'm sure that was just a let's add a S to it later. But to me, in my head, wheels started turning. Like, was it just going to be Tony? Like, what was the plan? I mean, again, we speculate at the beginning of the show, Phil, whether or not they move forward with Cap or Thor or anything else had this movie tanked. But I love that they're planting seeds. And since Tony's the first one, maybe the movie had to end this way without the focus being on him, but more or less about what comes afterward, you know?
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think that Iron Man, unlike a lot of the other trilogies, took a lot of the bulk of building Marvel as a universe. And I've said all the time, I think a lot of the better parts of his story arc happen outside of his solo movie, ironically. Like, I feel like a lot of his better story beats happen in Avengers. Um, Other than Iron
Yeah.
Man 3, I feel like Iron Man 3 does a better job of developing him as a character. But yeah, and I feel like that was a big problem with Iron Man 2 for me, is that it was just so much setup for other movies. Like, hey, here's Black Widow. Here, we're doing this. Here's this. Here's that. We're doing this eventually. Look, look, look. And it's like, okay, but give me a good Iron Man movie first. And I think this movie succeeds at it. But again, you could see that they hadn't perfected, making trilogies for each character like they have yet.
Yeah, they're just sort of taking baby steps with this movie, giant baby steps with this movie. Yeah, I see that. Um, I think it, like I said earlier, I think it sets the tone, and I think it's the best way to kick off this thing. And I think, the other guys, we're getting another Batman film, and I love the character. Don't misunderstand me, but like, there's ever only going to be one Iron Man. There'll be Iron Heart, but there's just one Iron Man. Like, I don't need any more. I think I've had all I need. I don't need any more. I mean, now one day if someone other than Feige comes along, or Feige hands the reins off, I want to do something else or whatever, and he decides, hey, let's reboot this thing. Let's start from scratch. Let's recast every character that they know. Let's do it different. And if and when that day comes, and I don't want to see it personally, I just got the one Iron Man. I'm totally fine with that. So I love that Marvel sticks to their guns here, and they're like, no, this is Tony's gone. That's how it is. I love that stuff. I mean, you know, and here's something else, Phil. If not for this movie, if not for 2 and 3, and for the Avengers films, Spider Man, everything in between that he showed up in, his death in Endgame means nothing. If he's still that callous, shallow, cocky, arrogant, it'd still be sad. But knowing that he did such a 180 and became essentially a good guy, like, no one in that theater is in tears. None of us. But man, the fact that they did so much character development makes his end all the more fitting. It makes it real, right?
Yeah, I mean, watching this movie, there's no way I can picture this guy as a dad. There's no
Mm.
way. Like, in the first 20 minutes of this movie, they're like, this guy, I could not see this guy as a dad. Um, so yeah, I think that the payoff they give us eventually, um, is worth it. And it's so weird because when you rank all of the single movie trilogies, I would put Iron Man towards the bottom. I don't think that he had as good as a trilogy as most of the other characters. But
Mm.
I just think that his movies are so important because it set up so many other things, and it took the brunt of having to set up a universe, and it didn't get a chance to be its own thing like some of the other did.
Yeah, for sure. This movie benefits from the universe that came after, but it also doesn't benefit when you go back and watch it after having watched the whole universe.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I
yeah.
agree. But yeah, man, there's so many things in this movie that this it's so hard to not get excited watching it. And I agree with you with the Batman stuff. Like, look, I'm pretty sure the new Batman movie is going to be good. But we kind of know all of the beats. We know what is his motive. We know Batman as a character. Even if they give us a better depiction of Batman, even if they give us a real detective story, it's Batman. We've seen Batman
Right.
in so many different iterations at this point. It's just like it's how many times can we rediscover the wheel? And so, and again, I really believe a good part of why Iron Man worked is because it felt so new and it felt so different. Um, and I just really wish Warner Brothers would do something like this, but they're spoiled. They've been spoiled with always having the rights to their characters. They
Mm.
don't have to go and use any C-list characters and build them up. Now, with that said, I did get excited at the brief scenes we saw from Black Adam, and just getting to see characters like Doctor Fate and Hawkman,
Oh,
and all of that stuff looks cool. And that's why I'm like, man, come on, just do something different, man. Give us a completely 180, like a Doctor Fate movie that's just like a horror detective movie or something like that. Just do something different, man.
yeah. I mean, like they've done with the TV shows, gave you something different. Like,
Yeah, and that's a big part of why I enjoyed Peacemaker so much because it's different than anything else they make.
mhm,
I mean, that's why Doom Squad is good. I mean Doom Patrol. That's why Doom Patrol is
mhm.
good.
Yep.
Uh, and I mean when the Flash first premiered on CW, it was more of like what I want to see them do with their movies, and that's why I don't ever want to make it a picking on. I'm a Marvel guy. I hate everything that DC does. There are a lot of DC characters that I absolutely love, and I just wish they would use them. Just,
Yeah.
but they just keep going back to the mill with the same 3 or 4 characters over and over.
I'm still waiting for the question. I want the question so bad I can't stand it. I want to
I
see some. I think it would be
yeah,
great.
I think they should at least give the question his own HBO Max series. I think that'd be fantastic.
Oh, ooh, I'm here for it.
Something
I'm
like
here
him
for it.
just solving a different weird mystery every episode.
Oh
That'd be great.
man, a who done it every week in the DC universe. That's fun stuff because he can cross paths with all sorts of ancillary characters from the DC universe that are not in the movies or the shows yet. All sorts of characters.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm here for that. Um, well, kids, we didn't do a massive deep dive on the film as we have been known to do here on the 6M. But this is one of those we do the the major beats of the film, which I think we've pretty much done here. How does I asked you earlier how this film holds up for you in the end. Where do you rate this film personally in the MCU? Where would you put it? High, low, middle? Where does it stand for you?
That's tough. I think it's certainly in my top 10.
Hmm.
Um, it'd be hard to not put it high because it's so important to the universe. It's so important to all of the rest of the movies afterward. Um, man, but there's so many other movies that are just better movies all around. But yeah, it's certainly in my top 10.
It's top 10 for me for sure. I don't know where I put it, but it's definitely top 10. I mean, it's just oh, so good. I mean, when the original sets off, everything is set off. It's chain reaction. I mean, it's hard to not give it its props. And plus, it's so well acted. It's well written, and I'm in the bag for this movie. I haven't made any secret about it. It's really good. Um, well, Phil, I think that'll do it for here for us. Give me, if you can, give me your last word on Iron Man.
Um, I think the further we get away from this, it's going to be seen as probably one of the most influential movies of the last decade. Just for what it did for the MCU and just what it did for the comic book boom. Like I would be hard pressed to pick any other movie in that time, and it came out in a year that was filled with great comic book movies. In 2008, that was the same year Dark Knight came out,
Mm.
Incredible Hulk. Um, There's something else I'm forgetting, but it was a good year for comic book movies, and I feel like it was the movie that did so much for the genre at that time. I mean, even if you're not a Marvel fan, it would be hard to deny how important Iron Man is.
Oh yeah, and we've said multiple times on the show before that Downey was born to play Tony Stark. I firmly believe that. I think everything in that guy's life led him to Iron Man. I firmly believe that because Tony Stark is a damaged character. Much as we said Downey was a damaged person. He was trying to rebound and get his life straight. Tony has to rebound and get his life straight. I think these two have a lot more in common than maybe at
Yeah,
first appears. So,
there's something so meta about him going through all that stuff in the cave, and Jensen telling him, don't waste this, don't waste your life.
oh my God, yeah, yeah.
When you really think about it, it's kind of ironic. And I mean, when you think of everything he's done since Iron Man, how he's had such a great third act of his career. I feel like I said third act a lot in this review, but he's had such a great final act of his career, and I don't want to make it seem like the guy is going to die tomorrow, but
Right.
man, when you look at everything he's done since 2008, it's pretty remarkable.
It really is. You talk about rebounding big time. I mean, and good for him, man. He got it together. He managed to, and not throwing hate at anybody that can't. Addiction is extremely hard to overcome. Troubled upbringing, dealing with issues. We could sit back and pass judgment and say all kinds of things about, someone should have got their head on straight. It's real easy for someone who has their head on straight to tell other people to get their head on straight. It's not easy. I mean, we can judge all we want to. God knows I've done it before, but you grow and you learn. But yeah, good for him. I'm happy for the guy, man, and I'm happy that we got him as Tony, because man, he freaking kills it every time. So, God only knows what the future for the MCU holds, folks. We know of all the projects in the pipeline, probably a lot more that we don't know about, which I'm fine with, because I love being surprised. Where we go from Tony Stark from here, I don't know what they'll choose to do, how they'll honor his legacy in the films. I'm sure they'll mention him, maybe show his photo here and there. Am I okay with him being a voice in the suit of Ironheart? If it fits, do it. I just don't want it to be cheap. I don't want it to be weird. I just don't want that. I want it to be, again, I go back to the Jordan taking the last shot in Utah. Just let that be it. Just let that be it. But that's me. We'll see. Like I said, if anybody can pull it off and make it work, it's this studio. We will see what happens next. In the meantime, that is Iron Man. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.